Disclosure Network New York is a grassroots organization celebrating our 17th year of producing 2 meetings a month throughout the year in Manhattan. We focus on cutting-edge UFO, ET issues, paranormal phenomenon, and related subjects to reveal what is really in back of mainstream news. We have prominent guest speakers who address issues of interest to the group live, here in person, or on Skype, or simply on the phone. Our motto, which we've had for 17 years, is connecting the dots to seek truth. Our members do intense investigative research into these various topics and share their findings at our meetings and with our fellow internet friends who will come up and look at what we've got either on YouTube, or we have a free service worldwide called dnny News Blast. We give emails every single day for cutting-edge events and news related to our fields of interest. To access that, please go to www.dnny.info, and you'll be connected there with our website, and it will give you directions on how to access this amazing service. It's free. We have an amazing guest here. It will be by phone interview. Jon Rapoport is an investigative reporter known worldwide for his amazing work. And Jon, I just want to tell you, we thank you so much for giving some of your time, personal time, to doing this interview today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
I've certainly read a number of your articles throughout the years, and I post that to the members of our group, so they've been seeing what's going on. I want to start with just a few quick questions, if I could, and then I want to go to another part of this. So I'd like to start off with, people here, members of the group, have submitted some of these questions, and we'll just go through them real quick. The first one is, what are your thoughts and opinions on Quano? Right? If you have any, one source said that Quanto is probably Jeremy Corsi. Do you have any opinions on that?
Well, QAnon, which I think is what we're talking about here, you know, I haven't paid a tremendous amount of attention to this because this is an anonymous source. Other people have delved deeply into the codes that he or they are using. I know that Corsi has said that this is, quote, military intelligence. My sense is here that there are a lot of people who are hoping that this presidential administration has a plan to derail the deep state, to bring criminals to justice in terms of very prominent officials and so forth, and to drain the swamp. And because there are so many people hoping that in the midst of all of this controversy and the attacks on Trump and so forth, that he has an ulterior plan which is quite convincing and brilliant, but as yet, you know, the details are secret, that QAnon is giving people a heads up that yes, this is the case. My attitude has been wait and see, to say the least, because it's very easy to take a situation and say, well, you see what happened here with the Syrian bombing, the missile strike, et cetera, that was really part of a kind of covert operation to pretend that we were really attacking, but we really weren't because we just damaged a few locations that weren't very important. People were evacuated. But behind that, Trump really has the intention to pull out of Syria, let the Assad government win, and defeat, finally, terrorists and ISIS people and so on and so forth. Maybe, but I don't automatically accept an anonymous source who is predicting that, and especially by using some kind of suggestive code. It might be true, it might not be, but all I can say is that I would prefer, if someone anonymous is making predictions and offering evidence, that they do it in plain, English. Let's see the reasons why the things are being said. Let's see what the proof is that there is some master plan of this administration behind other events which look threatening and ominous and so on and so forth. That would be my preference. And so that's all I can add to this conversation about that at the moment.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that thought. Next we have this one. How can we wake up our brainwashed fellow citizens? Do you have any thoughts on that, sir?
I do. Many thoughts on that. I'll try to share one or two here. You have to be the media. And by you, I mean anyone who is hearing this. So even if you don't have a website or a blog or whatever, and you do see, of course, that social media giants and tech giants are doing a lot of damage to independent voices by censoring them and blacklisting them and demonetizing them. So what people need to do is to seek out the truth in the best way that they can, to take what they consider to be the most reliable articles and videos and so forth on what is really happening in the world at a deeper level, and send out links to those articles and videos to as many people as possible all over the world. I don't mean that you automatically intrude on people's privacy by adding them to your email list on a regular basis, but you get the word out as best you can, as widely as you can, on a continuous basis. In other words, you become, in a sense, your own media outlet, because it's information that is going to, over the long term, wake people up. And if you just rely on independent media themselves to make all the global connections, then it becomes more difficult. But if 10,000 people suddenly decided, I'm going to be my own media outlet, and without starting a blog or a website, I am going to pass along links to the most important information that I think can wake up other people, we would see something revolutionary happening, because those 10,000 people would be a mighty force, and others that they pass along links to would in turn pass them along, and pretty soon you would see a key story, for example, that might travel the globe 3 or 4 times, traveling the globe 15 or 20 or 50 times. So in the absence of anything else, that to me is a vital thing to do. And the other thing to do is not to rely on social media like Facebook or Twitter to receive your information personally. In other words, know the blogs and the websites and the independent media outlets that you favor, that you believe are the most reliable, and go there on a regular basis directly, bypassing any need to invoke social media to guide you, because social media is stepping up its own censorship, and you're not going to be able to find what you need there. So those are 2 suggestions right off the top of my head.
Thank you, sir. Next question we have is, can you tell us if you have any information about the nuclear power plant in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, for October in 1947? One of our members' parents was in the area and saw a UFO hovering over the power lines there. Do you have any information on that?
Sorry, I don't. It's not an incident that I've researched, so, I could only reply in general terms about UFO sightings, which, from the untold thousands of reports that have come in over the years, obviously we're not dealing completely with people who are making it up or imagining that something is going on. It's real. But on that particular incident, I don't have any information.
Very good. Next question is, what was the Pope supposedly going to tell us in 1960 regarding disclosure of extraterrestrials in relation to the prophecies at Fatima? Do you have any thoughts on that subject in general?
It's another subject that I haven't looked into deeply, so I don't know what the Pope said in 1960. I couldn't really comment on it. But I do know that the Vatican in the last, I would say, 15 years has become increasingly interested in life elsewhere outside of planet Earth. And, I do think that's an interesting subject to explore more deeply.
Agreed on that, sir. How optimistic or pessimistic are you regarding the military tribunals in Guantanamo Bay Naval Base actualized before the end of the year? Is there anything you can think about the chances of that? Or
I'd have to ask which kinds of tribunals this person is talking about. Is he talking about prosecution of civilians? What specifically does this mean?
Hold it. Is anybody in the room? Is that their question? No, they're not in the room. Okay, we can't.
Well, the only reason I asked that question is I've seen a few rumors that military tribunals are going to be called to prosecute various swamp creatures, and
yes, sir.
my reaction to that was, where did this come from? I mean, if you're going to prosecute some of these high-level officials, you're really going to do it in military tribunals as opposed to, the court system where such prosecutions are usually handled? It seemed to me when I read this that this was somebody's notion of possibly, since Trump has surrounded himself with military officials, that there was going to be some kind of sudden shift where the military was going to be escalated in its judicial authority to be able to prosecute civilian, say, government officials, which to me would be illegal, to say the least. So I don't know where this came from.
Yeah, no, I understand the point there. We're going to move to what pointers would you give someone who wants to become an independent investigator?
Oh, well, I could talk for hours about that.
You could.
Because, okay, let's see. First of all, what is your medium? Are you a videographer? Are you a writer? Are you a broadcaster? Where are you looking to go? Because wherever that is, number one is you need to hone your skills to the point where you can convincingly present whatever the results of your investigations are. If you're trying to do this in a kind of slapdash fashion, where you're just kind of sitting there and talking, that's not going to fly very far with people that you would be trying to reach. So become a better writer, become a better videographer, become a better broadcaster. I mean, that's fundamental to increase your skills. And then the next question is, what are the major issues that you are intensely interested in and passionate about? And whatever they are, it doesn't matter. Basically, what you're thinking is, what the major official sources of information are giving us is false. They are lies by commission and omission. The context is missing. There is no deep dive into investigations in major media anymore. For the most part, they are infiltrated by, for example, assets of the CIA, et cetera, et cetera. So what I want to do as an investigator is to go more deeply and expose more and make it convincing. Okay, so write down the 2 or 3 or 4 major issues that you are the most passionate about, that you want to expose. I presume that you have already done some measure of investigation on these issues, and now you need to do more, much more. You need to go more deeply. Now, you then have a choice, which I would frame this way. Do I want to wait and write a book, or do I want to serially expose what I am discovering as I go along? Let's suppose it's the second. Then you have to start a blog or a website, some kind of a media outlet, a YouTube channel, where you are reporting on what you are finding as you are finding it on a continual basis. And then we come to the issue of evidence for your investigations. What is evidence? What constitutes evidence as opposed to random thoughts or opinions? And you have to contemplate that. Where are you finding your evidence, and what is it? Is it simply that somebody said something once and it was repeated several times, which I would call extremely superficial? Or can you cite more credible sources for your information? These issues really are the ones that should preoccupy people who want to become investigators. What is good evidence? Is it 2 or 3 anecdotes? Is it a study that has been done that is really credible? Is it interviews that you have done with people that you consider to be both authoritative and credible? How do you put all of this together? And one recommendation that I've made in the past is the following. Take your, let's say, your top issue and say to yourself, what is the official story about this issue? List the major points that sum up the official position on that story. Your job is now going to be to refute all of those major points. Well, they said X. This was, in fact, spread all over the media at the time of the such-and-so event that occurred, and blah, 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 blah. Now, this becomes now the engineered consensus as to what happened in that incident. And I am now going to set about refuting that point with the best evidence that I can find. Now, if you could do that with every major point surrounding that issue, you would be a long distance toward being a good investigator. And you would proceed even further from there to dig out what you consider to be the deeper truth that has been buried that you haven't already covered in refuting these points. Evidence is your friend, but you have to decide what constitutes the best evidence that you can find, and not simply go with sources who agree with you. And that is not always an easy proposition, because there's always a temptation to accept the people who agree with you and to cite them in making your points. Well, sometimes that's reasonable, and sometimes it's not, depending on who those sources are and what they're alleging. So this to me is the biggest issue of all, is deciding as you go what constitutes best evidence for the conclusions that you are drawing. And there is no, primer or manual that covers it's step 1 through 8, and then you know that you're on the right track. It's not really that way, because many times we're not dealing with smoking guns that you can just say, well, here is obviously the evidence that so-and-so didn't commit the murder, and it actually was this person over here, and we have the weapon, we have the fingerprints, we have the DNA, we have 17 witnesses who testified, blah, blah, blah. It's not that easy to do, because the people who are lying about the issue are doing their best to conceal the truth, obviously. So you're dealing in degrees of probability for what you can uncover most of the time. Now, sometimes you will get to smoking guns, but many times you won't. So you're now an evaluator of evidence and what constitutes the best evidence. Now, it really helps if you've studied logic, if you know the traditional logical fallacies, which you can find on any website if you just type that in, the traditional logical fallacies on a search engine, you'll find a lot of information. It hones your perception. It hones your sensors and your skills to some degree. It's not the whole story, but it makes you sharper in general if you study these things and you see, yeah, I've fallen for that one in the past, that fallacy, or the straw man fallacy, the circular reasoning fallacy, et cetera, et cetera. You do the very best you can to be an excellent investigator at this vis-a-vis evidence. At the same time, you recognize that you're going to follow certain trails of what looks like good evidence that will lead you to brick walls at the end of alleys at midnight with nothing further, because, for example, someone may have laid down that trail to waste people's time and to bring them to some false kind of conclusion. One of the biggest examples I could think of there would be the JFK assassination, where people can follow a line of exploration later to discover that it peters out, and it was probably put there intentionally to frustrate independent investigators. So you have to be willing to be curious in a number of directions, to explore, to investigate, based on your intuition, your instinct, your interest, even though you may only pick up a few tidbits along the way, and you won't find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So those are, as I say, I could talk for a few hours about this, but those are some suggestions off the top as to becoming an investigator. And I'm glad somebody asked the question, because I'm always urging people to do that, to become really good investigators, and to make it a kind of vocation, and to get better at it and better at it over time.
The young man who asked that particular question lives in Florida. He's a dear friend of mine, and he gets our dnny newsflash all the time. And he was very interested in having me ask you that question. So thank you so much. Those are all excellent points. What I'd like to do now is go through about 10 random names, and you'll probably know some of them. Maybe some of them you won't. But if you have any comment, any quick comments or thoughts about these various areas, I just thought that might be interesting to do. I'm sure that we could talk for a weekend with all the information that you have over the years and have, but this is just a random sampling of some areas that we have been discussing here at the group, the Disclosure Network New York. So the first one is, do you have any thoughts about the CERN collider?
Not good thoughts. I mean, I've read some of the articles. I just, I don't have a deep dive on that. I know what some people are saying, but I just can't give you authoritative information on it.
Okay, sir. We'll go right to the next one. Antarctica. There's been a lot in the press in the last few years about what possibly is there. Do you have any thoughts on the subject?
Again, I've got some vague thoughts which are really not based on investigations, but, you know, I would say that both for the Arctic and Antarctic regions, there's a great deal of information that's been withheld from the public over a long period of time. I don't know details, but the fact that people keep going back there in increasing numbers, people who are recognizable to the public, they see something there, or maybe plural, some things. But this is not my issue. And let me make a general comment. When I say that I've got nothing for you, I'm saying that because in the last comment I made about investigators picking their issues and diving deep, the ones that I say I really got nothing for you just means, look, I'm aware, but I haven't said, okay, this is one that I'm doing a deep dive on. So I haven't done it on CERN, I haven't done it on Antarctica, and so that's why I'm just saying, don't know.
Of course. Again, these are a wide variety of subjects here, but I just wanted to take a shot at them and see. The other one, of course, I think we're going to, the subject would be the deep state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any quick thoughts on just the general subject of the deep state?
To me, there are two general categories. The first is secret, powerful people inside the government, meaning the federal government in this case, Pentagon, CIA, NSA, other intelligence agencies, DIA, et cetera, et cetera. I would also include the FDA, especially there, although it's not usually mentioned because in partnership with pharmaceutical companies, they have unleashed a pharmaceutical plague on the country, which I have documented in much detail over the years in terms of drugs that are killing and maiming people at an alarming rate in the U.S. and, of course, in other countries as well. These are actors who are trying to undermine the basic meaning of the country as spelled out in the founding documents. They have an agenda which is one of two basic prongs. One, they are for American global empire. Two, they are globalists, meaning they want to essentially wreck the U.S. as an independent entity in every sense of that word that still exists, and merge us into a global management system headed by elites at the top. And by elites, I would point people, for example, toward the Trilateral Commission and other such groups. That's the first category of deep state. Second category would be these players who exist outside the government. And they would primarily fall under the category of globalists and technocrats. You would be looking historically at Skull and Bones. You would be looking again at trilaterals, Bilderbergs, let's call them elite bankers from various countries, and their efforts would be re-engineering not only the institutions of the planet, but the mind of human beings, the minds of human beings, through various types of mind control, in order to create a dependent society in which the overwhelming bulk of people are fitted into slots, in a technocratic society in which all functions are measured, regulated, especially energy use. And I would point people specifically to study 5G wireless coming in now. I would point people to study, for example, the Internet of Things. I would point people to study the direction that brain research is going in. The whole theme there is, and it began in the 1930s in America with something called Technocracy, Inc. I would heavily recommend a book by Patrick Wood titled Technocracy Rising. The idea was, and still is, we will control the planet because we are engineers. We will replace the politicians gradually or bring them over to our side by saying the future world must be scientifically, technologically, technocratically measured and controlled in order to apportion goods, services, and energies in ways that we decide. Private enterprise would eventually fade out and be subsumed under a technocratic state. So I would say that those are the two basic groups of the deep state.
Thank you. I think the next two little categories I have on this list flow exactly into your thoughts there. The next one up is the word chemtrails.
Okay, this is another issue where I must say I haven't made it one of my issues. But I have read enough and seen enough personally and reports by other people to say that this, I wouldn't say it's one technology, first of all. I would say that it's at least several different technologies deployed by different groups at different times. And the theme there appears to be the cover story is we're keeping the planet from warming. Mm-hmm. The actual operation, the covert op, is we are charging the atmosphere to be able to transmit communications of all kinds at great distances without having to position thousands and thousands more satellites. We want to charge the atmosphere so that it becomes a conductor for weaponized communications about weapons, about military conquest, about space, commands, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And on the flip side of that is an apparent diminishment of health of the world population by seeding it with heavy metals, chemicals, and so forth that are injurious to health, that weaken and debilitate populations. That is my impression. This is, again, not a subject where I will say, read my articles here and there, and I'll give you, 37 citations that demonstrate this specifically, but that is my impression.
Okay, very well. Just to know that this group here, Disclosure Network New York, has really gone into that subject of chemtrails, and we ended up putting our research on a website called lookupnow.info, and we have photographs and a lot of research on that to educate people about the subject. The next one down, there's only a few more left here, is fluoride in the water. Again, that's one of those subjects about health that just wanted to do you have any comment about that in general?
I do. This is a subject where I'd say that I've done some research. And so, first of all, fluorides really became an issue during the Manhattan Project to build an A-bomb, because you could say the side effect was the release of enormous amounts of fluorides in along the East Coast, New Jersey, and I believe Delaware. And the first lawsuits around the Manhattan Project were really about fluorides. And a determination was made, we're talking now in the 1940s, that a cover story could be developed. We want to convince the American people that fluorides are a good thing. And we could do that by making it a dental medical issue. And so a public relations campaign was consciously formed for just that purpose, and obviously it succeeded. So people should be aware of that. I've written about that. Fluorides and the A-bomb is sort of a paraphrase of a couple of articles I've written about it. The original researchers on this, whose names I don't have in front of me, wrote an article for the Christian Science Monitor, which was never published. And so they had to publish it independently. People can also look up a statement by William Hersey, Hirzy, from the EPA. He was, I'm going to say, the vice president, if I'm remembering correctly, of a union, a public union inside the EPA of scientists there. And he wrote, this is going back at least, I would say, 15 to 20 years, that there was ample evidence that fluorides were extremely damaging to health and that they should not be used in water supplies for sure. And I was made aware that an effort was made to push this into a major media story, but that it never really got legs. And the reason that it didn't get legs was clearly that major media did not want to cover this issue in that way because obviously this would have been a blockbuster. Scientists within the EPA are saying that fluorides are dangerous to health. We're talking about serious bone conditions, lowering of IQ, probably DNA damage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The treatment of water supplies with fluorides is a medical treatment that is being carried out without informed consent by the public wherever it is happening. That is patently illegal. And people have to recognize that as well. This is not just, oh, we're doing this for your good and it's a great thing. No, this is a medical treatment, a mass medical treatment. It would be as if somebody decided that what the population of America needed was Ritalin. And in order to make this happen, it would be dumped in water supplies of towns and cities across America without informed consent on the part of the public. Except, I would say, balancing the two, the fluorides would be far more dangerous. But Ritalin itself, believe me, would be dangerous. It's on that level. That's what's been happening. But the public has been brainwashed into believing that everybody knows this is a good thing. Therefore, the people who are saying, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, are the crazies, the conspiracy nuts, when it's just the opposite. And we have, you can go and do your own research and see areas of the world where fluorides are not permitted. And you can see the battles that have gone on inside town councils and city councils and so forth, where people form groups to take the fluorides out of the water or prevent it from being put into the water. This is a very serious issue, a very serious issue. This is toxic medication being imposed on the population. So that would be my, I could go on for a while longer, but that's important information.
No, absolutely, sir. And believe me, our group is on that issue. It's very important, and what you just said is exactly right. People have been brainwashed to thinking the opposite of what's really healthy, and that has worked, unfortunately, really well. And it's a wake-up call. I've got two more just words, and then just a general statement, and the rest of it, you can do whatever you like. The next one I have, and this is one of the things you had written at one point, I got a kick out of it, the puppets in Congress. And when I was reading that article you did, I thought, I bet you can actually see the strings standing. And I just wanted to ask you for any comments you might have on that.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much what we've got. We're looking at showbiz here. In other words, a congressman, how good is he at making it seem as if he is there doing his job only because he cares about his constituency and the country? How good is he at getting that across so that people say, well, I mean, maybe he's made mistakes, but obviously he's sincere. Well, that's his job to appear sincere, just like it's the job of the elite national television news anchors to appear that they are objective and are presenting the news as it really exists. So that would be my first comment, that we're dealing with showbiz, and the best of the actors in Congress are very good at presenting that impression. But meanwhile, just to give an example, let me see how much I can boil this down. I think everybody is aware that we're in the middle of an opioid crisis here, of drugs like fentanyl, OxyContin, and maybe 60 or 70 other synthetic painkillers that are so powerful that they are killing people and also making addicts out of people. Estimates go something like 2.6 million opioid addicts in the United States and 300,000 deaths since the year 2000. And some of this may be an underestimation. I've also seen a report that says that last year more Americans died from opioid use than died in the entire Vietnam War last year. Right? So this is gigantic. And there's much to say about this. I could talk for a long time about it. But vis-a-vis Congress, in the year 2016, Congress passed without debate, both houses, virtually unanimously, a bill. I don't have the exact name in front of me, but it was something like ensuring patient access to medical drugs, something, something. And Obama signed it on April 9th, 2016. Now, what this did was it made it extremely, extremely difficult for the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, to march into the offices of a major pharmaceutical company and say, we know you're involved in trafficking opioids, not simply supplying them to doctors for patients who really need them, who are in agonizing chronic pain, but you are trafficking millions of pills. And we are now freezing those shipments, and we are prosecuting your executives. This bill, passed by the puppets of Congress under the control of pharmaceutical interests, made it nigh on impossible for the DEA to do its job, and thereby fueled an extreme escalation in the opioid crisis in America. Now, if you want a mainstream source on this, the Washington Post did a major article on this several months ago. Nobody in Congress is talking about this now. You'll get congressmen who get up on their hind legs and say, my God, we've got a terrible crisis here and we have to do something about it. But nobody is saying, my God, I voted for that bill, and now we've got to introduce a new bill to repeal it immediately before more people die. Why is that? Well, just use your common sense. They could introduce a bill tomorrow and sweepingly move it onto the floor of both houses and vote to repeal the bill that they passed in 2016, and now enable the DEA, and by the way, I had an inside source on this, to go in there and begin ripping to shreds these pharmaceutical companies who are the prime source and supplier of illegally trafficked opioid drugs in America. Not the only source, but the prime source. But it's not happening. Why isn't it happening? Because we have puppets in Congress who are doing the bidding, in this case, of pharmaceutical interests. So that's an example of what it means to be a puppet in Congress.
That's an excellent example. And again, as you're even saying it, your blood is boiling, I think, in the room here, that it's so in your face, awful, and a crime and a scandal, and yet here we are. Just got one more to go with that, the word thing, and then we can go to a general statement. Some people feel as though the New World Order and the Illuminati are weakening, and some of them are saying they are more powerful than ever in the music industry and a lot of other areas, and that they're really getting more control and it's growing. Do you have any general thoughts on that? I know it's a huge subject, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. I would say both statements are true at the same time. We don't see the chaos that's engendered by both statements being true at the same time, but it's there. In other words, people who are, let's call them, power elite, are panicking. They are also trying to consolidate their control. Independent media is on the rise. Major media is in decline, despite all of their efforts. They are desperate, and so they are shedding, in many cases, their cover of objectivity and just simply going on the attack, hammer and tongs, in order to promote their position, so to speak. Mm-hmm. All of this is happening at the same time. I think we're talking to some degree here about individual psychology. In other words, there are people who say the New World Order is more powerful than ever before, and they're taking over, and that's the story, period. And you could translate that as meaning, when that person says that, I favor doom. That's what I'm looking for. Underneath it all, that's what I want. I want the power that has been trying to take over completely, because it justifies my personal belief about many things, including myself, that we are doomed. And there's nothing anybody can do about it, which is bullshit. Many people use their comprehension of global events and so forth to justify their own lack of doing anything at all. On the other hand, you've got people who are saying freedom and utopia are at hand, and the forces of good who are secret behind the scenes in the next 6 months are going to stage a major palace revolution, and everything is going to be wonderful, and just stand by and watch it happen, and everything is going to be great. To me, that's bullshit too. So I guess what I'm saying there is many opinions as to the success or failure of the New World Order are really colored and shaded by the person making the statement or the person holding the belief and their psychology. My stance, as it has always been in my 35 years of working as a reporter and a researcher, is the game is afoot. It's never over. Freedom is never over. If you look at the history of the planet, you see the emergence of the individual out of the mass, out of the group, out of the consensus, out of the tyranny, out of the dictatorial state, tribe, clan, whatever you want to, period you want to look at. You see the long, very deep struggle for freedom. And eventually that becomes freedom of every individual, as long as he doesn't trample on the freedom of others. To me, that's the real history. And when you look at some of the struggles that have actually taken place, you can see that we have no reason now to think that all is lost, because they won. Here and there, now and then, in key situations, the people on the side of freedom won. Time is long, my friends. Regardless of what happens in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, time is far longer than that. So, introspect a little bit and see, what is your position on this issue? And is it being colored by justification or making excuses, et cetera, or is it a real position, whatever it is? And then think, okay, there's always something I can do. There's always something I can do. I have to figure out what that is, and then I do it to the best of my capability. And I have faith in the individual, ultimately, in the long, 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 long term. that he has and she has resources and power and potential beyond her estimation of what that is. You just have to find it and use it.
Well said, sir. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I can't believe that we're almost up to the 60 minutes we agreed upon. I knew it was going to be crazy quick when we said we were going to do the interview, and boy did it's just zoomed. We're up to 5 more minutes and it'll be the hour. I want to leave, if there's anything you would like personally to say, or I know you have products, I know they can go online to see, but anything you'd like to say to the group or in general, please, the floor is yours.
Well, the first thing I would like to say is I appreciate the time and keep up your efforts. I mean, it's great to know that you're on the case here. It's very important, extremely important. My website is nomorefakenews.com. It's been there since 2001. Everything that I'm doing, including products and so forth, you can find there, and you can also get on the free email list. And I write articles almost every day and publish them, and have been doing that for the last 17 years online. And as far as my attitude as a reporter is concerned, and I do research on other issues that go beyond reporting, but I'll stick to that for now, is I think it's important to develop a sense of astonishment at the level of deception that goes on. If you lose that, then you lose something important. Because as long as you can remain astonished at it, then you have the energy to do something about it. And I would refer you to one example that I have been relentless about for the last, I would say, 6, 7 years. And it illustrates what major media refuse to consider or cover. And I have approached major media with this many times. They know about it. June 26, 2000, Journal of the American Medical Association. Author Dr. Barbara Starfield, the late Barbara Starfield, who at the time was a revered public health expert at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. So everybody's credentials up and down the line were meticulously mainstream. So on July 26, 2000, the journal published a review of hers called Is U.S. Health Really the Best in the World? And she cited, and later told me in an interview, that this was a conservative estimate, that in the U.S. every year the medical system kills 225,000 people. So over a 10-year period, that would be 2.25 million people. Now, this doesn't even take into account the number of people that are maimed, severely injured, et cetera, et cetera. And she's mainly talking about hospital treatment and toxic pharmaceutical drugs that are approved by the FDA and correctly prescribed as the sources of all of this destruction. So in my interview of her, which occurred maybe, a year before she died in 2009, I asked her, are you aware of the federal government doing anything to remedy this situation? She said, no. I said, has the federal government ever approached you to consult in the area of trying to remedy this? She said, no. Right? Now, there are other studies which I have cited in support of what Starfield wrote. And again, she said, this is a conservative estimate. So here is a story which, if the major media wanted to improve their ratings by a gigantic amount, or their the number of newspapers they sell, they would not only expose this now, but they would investigate it and set the hounds loose and pound on this sucker for the next year or two in a way that they have the resources to accomplish. They would interview people, they would find people, they would get people to confess that they know and are doing nothing about it. They would get people to roll over on other people. We're talking about government officials, medical schools, pharmaceutical companies, doctors, all the way up and down the line. And turn this into a story that would blow the roof off of the sacred church of medical cartel. But it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. But I continue to be astonished by it enough to keep writing about it and to press it home. And my articles have not only been published by me, but in a number of other websites and so forth and publications, so that more and more people are waking up to this fact and are becoming aware of it. And based on that, they can infer, well, if this is happening, then how can I trust medical authorities to be honest about that, or this, or that issue, or this issue, or the vaccine issue, or the fluoride issue, or many other issues, psychiatric drugs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So continue to be shocked and astonished by huge deceptions, because it gives you the energy to keep on going. That's what I would leave you with.
And sir, I just want to say, you certainly exemplify that kind of energy of searching for truth and fighting for that. It has been an absolute honor to have this interview with you. I hope that you'll consent maybe later on in the year to a part two, because
absolutely,
we've got so much, as you well know, so many subjects here that deserve our attention. But I just want to say that you're at the top of the list. You're an amazing investigative reporter. Thank God for you and others like you that really care to explore and to find the truth and to disseminate that truth.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, and you and everybody who's there and involved, and wish you good hunting.